Dr. Lay actually works with me. She's a wonderful faculty member, and she's currently an associate professor of nursing at Slippery Rock University. Her background includes work as a clinical nurse specialist in community health, pediatric and adult home health care, and emergency department nursing. She is a member of Theta Rho, chapter of Sigma Theta Tau International Nursing Honor Society, and the Association of Community Health Nurse Educators. Her research interests focus on nursing education and the role of the nurse in establishing and sustaining community health and well-being, including global health and care of vulnerable populations. Dr. Lay is a published author in several nursing and education journals and presented regionally, nationally, and internationally on these topics. Dr. Lay, the floor is yours. I will turn my video back on when you have 5 minutes for questions, okay?
Okay, let me see if I can, gonna share my screen here. And hopefully you can see.
Yes, we can, Dr. Lay.
Fantastic. So Christina, thank you for that introduction. And good morning. I guess I can still say good morning. We have 10 minutes till noon. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining in my presentation on gamification in nursing education. So after today's presentation, hopefully you'll be able to define the term gamification, discuss evidence-based learning outcomes of educational gaming, and consider incorporating game-based learning into your nursing courses. You know, as educators, we are continuously challenged to discover new, innovative teaching strategies, meet a variety of learning styles, motivate students, facilitate participation and engagement, teach problem solving, decision making, critical thinking, teamwork, and communication skills. Not to mention accomplishing all of this while we make learning fun, exciting, and student-centered. A daunting task, right? Well, welcome game-based strategies. So before we go any further, let's clarify a few terms. The term gamification was coined in 2003 by Nick Pelling. He was a British computer programmer and game designer. It's the process of using game elements in non-game contexts, such as education, for the purpose of increasing user experience and motivation. So it's not just playing games, it's the intentional incorporation of elements into the activity. So the element, whoops, I'm so sorry. The elements that are needed to qualify an activity as a game is there needs to be rules. There needs to be some type of competition. There needs to be scaffolding of information or of content. Point scoring is desirable, and there needs to be some type of social connection. Next, we'll talk about application. Instead of solely using letter grades, there might be a ladder of experience points that the students climb. These points might then translate to letter grades that are assigned based on how many points each student has accrued. I used this method in a game that I recently incorporated into one of my courses that we'll talk about a little bit later. Students should think of the activity as a game. So completing an assignment might be referred to as embarking on a quest, or meeting a specific learning outcome may be referred to as unlocking a room, as in an escape room that some of you might be familiar with, that I will mention again. And a teacher might organize students into guilds or leagues or explorers who work together to complete quests and rack up points. There are now numerous examples of gamification applied to learning environments, both online and offline. One popular use of gamification is the use of badges to recognize certain accomplishments. Badges have been around for a long period of time. for example, scouting merit badges, but its effectiveness in engaging participants has allowed it to be a staple of most gamified experiences. Some universities will grant digital badges to students each time they complete a qualified university activity or experience. These earned badges then can create a unique digital portfolio of skills and achievements that could be useful to potential employers in the future. Another popular example of gamification is the leaderboard. And research has shown that leaderboards are an effective way to motivate through competition. You see this method if you play games on your phone, Words with Friends or Candy Crush, right? You always want to get onto the leaderboard. Quest to Learn, or Q2L, a public school based in New York City, opened in 2009, offered its first class of sixth graders a gamified curriculum in which learning happens through motivation of play. Another example is the Khan Academy, which is an online gamified learning platform that features instructional videos and exercises on a variety of topics. So let's look at the features of educational games. Educational games refer to a broad category of games that are driven by educational goals, not entertainment, as I mentioned earlier. To be considered an educational game, the elements that were mentioned in the previous slide need to be present. There needs to be a clear identified educational goal. It's rule-based. It allows the player to understand the environment. It is responsive. It allows the player to experience control. It can be challenging. It is cumulative. In other words, it allows the player's previous actions impact their progress towards their goals. And there's some competition involved. I've listed a few fairly simple, easy to access game-based learning activities on this slide. One of the most common, I think, that we as nurses have used or seen is the ethical debate. It can be used as an example of gamification because a debate can be transformed into a game. The facilitator designs case studies that present ethical dilemmas. Usually students are assigned a case, and each team presents their argument based on ethical principles and theory. The class votes for the strongest arguments, and points are accumulated to determine the winner. It's not truly a debate since there is no rebuttal, but it is a game since it has all the required elements. There are rules, there's a competition, points are accrued, and there's that social connection. Another example are the board or TV-like games. They require students to work in a group, to think critically, analyze responses. These appeal to kinesthetic, auditory, visual, and cognitive learners. They incorporate sound, color, and graphics. The visuals and sound, along with competition, works well to hold attention and engage them in the learning process. A large volume of content can be covered in a relatively short time. For example, a Jeopardy game. Many times the Jeopardy game is used as a review for exams or for tests. Little equipment is needed. Basically, a computer or projector screen. There's little to no cost. The templates can often be found free online. Simulation. I'm going to take just a minute to talk about simulation because we're all familiar with simulation, but not all games are simulation, and nor are all simulations games. Much simulation used in healthcare education includes role play or simulated scenarios designed to impart information or improve skills. The facilitator assesses effectiveness of the experience through structured debriefing. You can see the photo that I have here. This was a simulation that we incorporated into a community health class on home health nursing, where this one student played the role of the nurse, another student played the role of the patient, and at that institution, we also had a built-in apartment that we used as our environment or as the setting. So was this a game? No, this wasn't a game. This was a simulation. but can it be made into a game? Can it be gamified? Sure. And a good example of that are escape rooms. Again, I'm not going to talk about escape rooms here. Many of you are familiar with escape rooms. The last few nursing conferences I went to, this was a huge topic of discussion and conversation and presentations. With escape room, students work in teams to try to solve problems or answer questions to obtain clues, then unlock the next level. And they keep going until they reach the outcome, until they escape the room or their patient survives, or whatever scenario you choose to design. So as the storyline unfolds with an escape room, usually points or badges are awarded. Another example is the interactive web-based scenario game. It's referred to also as scenario-based learning or experience play. These are interactive web-based games that use interactive scenarios. Again, it's students working their way through a storyline based on a problem which they're required to solve. A web-based game that I used was created by the CDC, or is available through the CDC, and is able to be accessed free online. And I am going to, in a second, pull this up for you to see, but it can be played on the CDC website, or it can be downloaded on a tablet or as a mobile app. To show just how complex solving an outbreak can really be, the game lets the player step into the shoes of an epidemiologist. So I use this in my community health / public health course on the unit of infectious disease and the role of the nurse. The player's mission is to get clues and analyze data to solve the outbreak and to save lives. The game has 2 levels and 20 missions. Every mission is unique and requires the player to analyze data provided and then decide what the correct course of action should be. There are 5 parts to each mission, each addressing a different aspect of disease investigation and mitigation. Do you quarantine a village? Do you interview people who are sick? Do you run more lab tests? The better your answers, the higher your score, and the quicker you climb the ranks. And then you are able to open new and higher level scenarios. So let's see, I have 2 plans here. My plan A was to bring up the website. My plan B was to go on with the slides with my screenshots. So I'm going to stop sharing. And it worked earlier this morning. For some reason.
It did. You reshared, right? Did a new share?
Yeah, I did the reshare. I am so sorry.
Bummer.
Let's end the show. Nope, I'm just going to go back to my.
Well, that's too bad, but the slides will give us an idea.
Yeah, it worked this morning and we had all the bells and whistles.
We did.
Okay, can you see my PowerPoint again?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I am sharing.
You are not.
And you're not seeing it.
No, ma'am. you clicked share, you clicked on your PowerPoint, and then you clicked the button on the bottom that said go or whatever. There's a green button to click.
Anything now?
No, ma'am. This brings up the thought, technology's great.
What
And
are you saying?
I'm seeing all the faces. I do not see your screen at all. I just see.
I am now seeing my screen. It just popped back on. Oh my. All right, I am sharing my screen.
You are not, but you might want to just talk us through it.
I will.
Because
I'm going back to my.
There
Okay,
it is.
can you see it? Can you
Yes,
see it
can
now?
Yes.
It's up. Yep. Sweet.
All right.
There you go.
All right, we're back to my screenshots. Unfortunately, you're not going to hear the music. You're not going to hear the sound. I'm not sure what happened there because this morning when we practiced, it came up without a problem. So anyway, the learning objective of this game, as I mentioned before, was to apply epidemiologic principles and identify the roles of public health professionals. And the mission is to uncover the clues and analyze the data. And the scaffolding is clearly involved because you need to master cases in level 1 to unlock cases in level 2. And your reward is that you earn badges and ribbons. And then I converted their badges and ribbons into course points. So there is some competition and there are points awarded. So when you get to the site that we couldn't get to, but it really is out there, your opening page reveals 2 levels. So obviously you're going to start at level 1 as a student. And in level 1, there are 12 outbreaks. Once you complete these 12 outbreaks, solve these 12 outbreaks, you can move on to level 2, which contains 8 outbreaks. And you can see you can earn 18,000 points in level 1 and 12,000 points in level 2. You can see I've been playing with this and I've earned 4,650 points already. So when you get on to you click on your level 1, you can see your scenarios here. So if we click on the first scenario, we can see it's called Breathless in the Midwest. And it gives you a little information and you can click start. And your mission comes up. And you can see it's a startling outbreak that's been reported in Chicago and Milwaukee. Within the past 2 days, 15 people visited the emergency room complaining of symptoms. Several people have died and others are near death. So we need your help to put an end to the outbreak. And you begin this investigation as an assistant. And you can work your way up to a specialist. So you start with your first clue. The first reported case is a 37-year-old musician from Chicago named Zeke. You start by talking to Zeke to find out what he was doing before he got sick. And he tells you he started feeling sick as he led a music workshop. And the scenario goes on. With each clue, you need to answer a question. So in this first section, the question is, where do you think Zeke caught whatever made him sick? Was it on the flight? Was it at the workshop? Or is it too soon to know for sure? So you choose your answer. If you're correct, you go forward and so forth. If you don't answer correctly, you have multiple attempts. You are allowed multiple attempts to go back. At the end of the scenario, there's a little learning slide that tells you more about the disease and more about the outbreak. This particular outbreak ended up being anthrax, inhalation anthrax, that occurred while working with dried goat hides. So when you finish your scenario, you can see, once you solve your scenario, I should say, you see your achievement and your points, and you move on to solve another outbreak. Okay, so how was this activity gamified? One way was to adapt the grading system. Students earned course points based on the level of badges or ribbons that they earned. Okay, for example, you can see here, if they needed to earn at least 13,000 points to get 20 course points. This whole activity was worth 50 points. As they progressed, the more points they earned, the more badges they earned, the more course points they collected. Once they finished level 1, they can move on to level 2. If they complete all the scenarios, they earned 50 course points. Okay. Some might ask, why did I start at 13,000 points? When I was doing this activity myself, I realized after 13,000 points, if the students completed these scenarios correctly up to 13,000 points, they have at least a basic understanding of epidemiologic principles. Okay. I want to just interrupt here a second and say there's a severe storm going on right now in my area. So hopefully keep your fingers crossed that we don't lose electricity. I just heard some lightning and thunder. So if you hear this in the background, that's what it is. I also included a discussion board, whoops, where once they completed this activity, they go to the discussion board and they need to choose one scenario. They need to discuss the ways that data were collected and presented in the scenario. What factors affected the quality of the data? How might have the data quality been improved? List 3 important aspects that you learned from the activity. And what questions would you like to ask about this topic? Then they need to reply to one of their peers' questions. So this discussion board was also part of the assessment where they accumulated course points. I did a short student survey following the conclusion of the course. 3 simple questions. Did you feel that this activity was helpful in learning the content? Did you think it was the appropriate level? And would you recommend it for future courses? As you can see, almost 80% thought it was helpful in learning the content. Most thought it was at the appropriate level, and most would recommend it for future courses. I asked if it was the appropriate level because on the website, it said it was designed for middle to high school students, but it could be adapted for undergraduate learning also. As I was completing the activity, I found it very hard to believe that a middle school or even a high school age, a student would be getting full advantage of the activity and of the content. So some of the student feedback. I learned a lot from the game. It makes learning easier and more enjoyable. It was interesting. It really made you think about the next action. I kept on going without even realizing how many points I acquired because I thought it was interesting. I liked that there were many different scenarios. It made me think outside the box. I would do a few every night. It allowed for flexibility, learning, and was fun. I thought it was a great addition to the class. I really enjoyed the infection detective activity online. It was a fun way to learn. And I enjoyed the assignment rather than just writing papers and discussion boards. It's the only class that did something like this. And I thought it switched up things a little bit. So just to recap, again, some of the advantages. We know that the digital learner has a cognitive style characterized by multitasking, short attention span, and an exploratory and discovery approach to learning. That being said, the characteristics of game-based learning can also be considered its advantages. Students feel ownership for their learning. It supports active student-centered learning. Games provide an environment of fun, excitement, and relaxation, which in itself helps reduce anxiety and positively influences the learning process. It provides immediate feedback through the discussion of correct answers and their rationales. And many students prefer learning activities. Not all students, but many students prefer learning activities that include teamwork. Definitely excitement, entertainment, and technology. However, as with any other activities, there are challenges. So despite the advantages outlined, there is still some skepticism and controversy surrounding the contributions of gamification to educational outcomes. Not all students are going to be satisfied. Gamification can be resource intensive depending on what activity you're using. For example, escape rooms. They can be very resource intensive. You may need multiple faculty to carry it out. The planning can take many, many hours. Instructors may be reluctant to try a new activity. There may be some cultural mistrust. There is a lack of empirical research. There is some out there that I'm going to address in a moment, but especially in nursing, there is not a whole lot out there. And it may not be appropriate for all needs or for all audiences. The evidence-based learning outcomes that do exist, Reed did a systematic review of the literature and showed that it increased level of knowledge and retention. It did improve team building skills. It did reinforce critical thinking skills, increase motivation to learn, increased engagement in learning, increased level of confidence in abilities, and there was a high level of student satisfaction. So in conclusion, engagement rises from passion, intrinsic motivation, and flow. Flow is the optimal state between boredom and anxiety. It's a feeling that you get when reading a book and you can't put it down, or binge watching a show. It is also the state that students are in when playing video games. We can transform how people learn if we enable them to enter this state of flow. Games designed properly provide the perfect canvas for learning. And that was a quote from one of the authors that I came across in my lit review. And my references. And thank you so much for listening. And any questions?
Oh, I think Dr. Mirth has the first question. I see her lovely face.
Hello, Dr. Murph.
Hi there. Thank you. I want to tell you, thank you so much for this presentation. I've been doing games for a long time and I just love to play games. Now, the epidemiology assignment, please forgive me if you already said it and I missed it. My first question is, where did you find this game at? Was it a website? And then did you say the students worked in teams?
Okay, good questions. The website that I used was the CDC website. It's on the Center for Disease Control website. And I happened to be looking at some information on epidemiology and I haphazardly came across it. So it is accessible on the CDC website. Students can play it on their computer. They can download it on their phone. There's an app. So there's multiple ways that students can access this.
Thank
Okay,
you.
does that help with that?
Yes.
And And you asked about teams, and you were really astute there, because that is one of the missing pieces. They did not work in teams. And I thought about this long and hard. They worked individually, not in teams. But I'm sure there are ways that you can incorporate it for them to be able to work in teams. The most I can say is the discussion board. There was some collaboration with each other, but it wasn't teamwork per se. But I'm sure I am, as Christina mentioned earlier, we are a 100% online program, and it's asynchronous. So it's difficult for our students to all get together at one time for synchronous classes, but we do have them on occasion in some activities where they work on group papers where they find their own way of getting together. So I'm sure it can be adapted to be a team effort and a team activity where they can compete against the teams. I haven't gotten that far, but that's a great question.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Lay? We have about 40 seconds remaining before we move on to the next speaker. And Dr. Lay, I don't have any for you because you answered them all. The ones I had written down, you answered them in your presentation.
That's great. I'm glad I answered your questions. And I apologize that we couldn't get that website, because there is some great music that goes along with these slides.
Oh, we do have a question now in the chat box. How do you handle pushback from faculty who do not believe in learning through games?
How do I handle the pushback? I am very fortunate to work with a group of faculty who appreciate all types of teaching learning strategies. And I haven't had, fortunately, any pushback. However, that wasn't so. I've been in education now for approximately 20 years. And I remember my first few games were using Jeopardy-like games in class, where it was a face-to-face class. They had timers and played games. And I know there were some faculty that said, "What's going on in that classroom? I went past your classroom. There's a lot of noise. It doesn't sound like they were learning." And I'm like, they were having a really good time, and they were playing games, and they were learning. So there was faculty pushback. But as I think now, as we talk more about gamification and the empirical research that's out there, and we see the positive outcomes, hopefully there will be less faculty pushback.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And yes, we're a nice group to work with. I would agree.